Welcome back to the Chiro Money Show. We're helping chiropractors make better financial decisions so they can build stability in their finances and a lifestyle that they love. We're your hosts, Chris Shield and Scott Campbell, financial planners with Align Wealth. Welcome back.
How are we doing today, Chris?
Doing well, man. How are you?
Good. Yeah. Doing great.
Fired up.
Great. Yeah. I'm feeling fired up today.
Good.
Usually it's you. It's you.
Your turn.
It's great to get fired up about certain things so that we can turn it into a podcast topic.
Yeah. I mean, it all comes down to motivation, right? Like some days we, whether it's working in our practice or working out, building strength, some days we're all in and motivated to be there. And those are awesome days. And other days we're just kind of going through the motions. But at the end of it, it's good to have these days where you're fired up and love what you're doing.
For sure.
Yeah.
For sure. Yep.
So you had a good idea for today. Let me set the stage here. So if for our listeners here, if you're a practice owner, imagine if you had to hire a chiropractor tomorrow to do exactly the work that you do in your practice. The adjusting work, the chiropractic work, not the business management and HR and whatever, all the stuff that comes with being a practice owner, just 32 hours a week that you are adjusting or whatever those hours are. What would you have to pay an associate to do that work? And after that, would there be anything left over as far as profits within the business?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, it's such a great question. I think from our experience now of working with chiropractors in different stages of their career, I think this episode is really going to be geared towards the owner who's probably in their first 5 years of practice, or you're a new grad thinking about whether or not you want to consider being a career associate or move into practice ownership at some point. We've worked with practice owners across the board in terms of monthly revenue that equates to $400,000 or $500,000 a year in revenue, maybe even a bit less than that, all the way up to $1 million half practices with multiple practitioners in the practice, right? And we've seen overhead in the range of 35%, maybe even a bit lower than that, all the way up to 70%, maybe even a bit higher than that, right? And everything in between. And one thing that I've commonly found is that when we start working with a brand new client, it's pretty rare for them to know what their overhead is. Maybe they have a rough idea, but they're never like, yeah, my overhead is X. I understand my books. I think back to our conversation with April a few episodes back, most docs don't truly know their numbers the way they ought to know their numbers in terms of what's coming in, what's their overhead after they pay their associates, and what's left over for them as the owner.
Yeah. They might have a ballpark. Yeah. I'd say that the odd time someone's got a ballpark of my monthly expenses are about X.
Yeah.
But they've never probably gone through the level of detail to look at what is that as a percentage of their top line revenue? How much are they bringing in? Is that a reasonable amount for expenses?
Yeah, I think the other thing that we commonly see is that in terms of what the owner is paying themselves, it's they're in the mindset that whatever is left over after overhead is what I can pay myself. And they kind of lump their pay into one category of what is left, I can pay myself that.
And that's not immune to chiropractic. That's any business owner. In I don't know about you, but in my past experience with talking to other business owners, everybody kind of looks at the same. A lot of people do look at it the same way. It's whatever's left over is what I pay myself, and we'll figure that out later, basically.
Yep. Yeah, for sure. When in reality, I think as the owner, I think it's important to view how you're getting paid in a few different lights, because it's different. Being an owner and the responsibility of doing clinical adjustments, taking on the role of managing a practice, managing staff, and making business and management decisions, as well as just taking on the financial risk of being a practice owner, warrants the additional profitability of taking on that risk of ownership. So it's almost kind of looking at your overall pay in those three buckets, if you will.
Yeah. And not
versus an associate.
Yeah. And I was just going to say, not to discount an associate. Sure, they are still very similar in the way that they're approaching things, right? They have an element of running a business still, I think the key distinction here is just like that difference between the practice owner that has the lease for the space and has all the other overhead and staffing requirements that come with that versus the associate that still is usually has a PC, they're incorporated, and they just don't have that same level of overhead and risk in their business venture.
Yeah, for sure. For sure.
So, as you would expect, the more risk you're willing to take, hopefully, the higher rate of return you're going to get. So, that same concept can apply here, where the practice owner should be rewarded for the additional risk they're taking of business ownership.
Yeah, for sure. And one of the big reasons why we like that the profit first cash flow system that we've talked about in the past, where we're bucketing cash flows coming in, collections that are coming in. We want to split that into its various bank accounts. One being owner's compensation, what you're going to draw from the practice as your pay on a regular basis, ideally monthly, and then profitability as a percentage of your collections, as a true kind of separation of like, I want to prioritize profit, whether you're starting off at 1% or you've worked your way up and grown your practice and grown your team and whatnot. Now you're, taking a 5, 10, 15% profit from your practice on a regular basis. Very separate from your owner's compensation of what you're paying yourself monthly.
And very different from the traditional pay yourself whatever's left over
Exactly.
with
Yeah.
no clear system.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you think we should hit this example of like what kind of got me, yeah,
Yeah.
what got
Yeah.
Scott fired up today about this?
Yeah, totally. Tell us how, because there's different ways to think about this, right? Like, what is your replacement cost, or what would it cost you to go out and hire somebody to do the work you're doing right now? How? Walk us through how you looked at that.
Yeah. Yeah. It started with a relatively new client that we've been working with, like great individual, great practice. Things are moving in the right direction for this practice for sure, but it's still early days, first year or two in practice. Things are growing, things are good. But when we think about when we're looking at his revenue, after we did a detailed analysis of his cash flow and his overhead and expenses, one thing we realized right away was his overhead was around 60%. So not 70, but definitely not 40 or 45, like a fairly high overhead. But when we looked at his overhead expenses, it was fairly lean. There was not a whole lot of fat in his overhead. His primary overhead costs, his rent or his lease, plus his staffing costs as well. There wasn't a lot of areas to say, hey, we could cut this and that and get you down from 60% down to 55 or 50 right away and therefore be able to pay you more. So I guess to paint the story in his example and what got me thinking about this was he shared with us the other day, I'm doing about 120 patient visits per week on average. Okay. So let's think about it through this light and we'll walk through like an example, hypothetical here. So say you're this doc, let's call him John, not his real name. Say John's doing 120 patient visits per week. And let's assume John is working 46 full weeks throughout the year. He'd be roughly bringing in about 26,000 per month or so of top line revenue, or about 300,000 over the course of a year into the practice.
Based on about a $55, $60 per adjustment?
Yeah, somewhere in that range. Say average adjustment cost $55. So he's bringing in 300,000 into the practice.
Just from the work he's doing as a chiropractor, doing his adjustments.
Exactly. So in John's case, John, after going through his profit and loss and understanding his overhead, John is in a situation where he can only pay himself $100K a year right now. So he's bringing 300,000 into the practice on average throughout the year, and he's paying himself $100K in the form of salary. And at the moment, there's no extra percentage being allocated to profit. It's at 0% right now because his overhead's at 60% and he needs everything else to pay himself as much as he can to support his personal lifestyle needs for his family right now, which is understandable. So he can pay himself $100K. Well, $100K out of the 300, that's only 35% that he's collecting from what he's actually bringing in. So that's where it got my brain thinking. It's like, hey, if John was like, you know what, I got to step away from the practice. I got to find a chiropractor to come in and replace me permanently for a period of time. And he said, hey, Sally, will you come in and fill in my shoes? I got 120 patients per week that you can start seeing right now. Do you want the
My
job?
split. What's my split,
Yeah. Well,
Scott?
what's the split, right?
60, right?
Is it 60-40? Is it 50-50, 55-45, whatever it is? It's unlikely that associate's going to say, yeah, you can pay me a 35% split, right? They're not going to take that job.
Exactly.
And that's just to do the chiropractic work.
So just to go through the numbers, I know people can do mental math probably faster than me, but at a 50% split, that's 150K of pay. At a 60%, that's 180. So 150 to 180 is what it's going to cost you, ballpark, to bring in an associate to see that 120 patients a week. That's more than you're paying yourself right now
Yep. In John's case,
in
right?
John's case.
And John also not only has the responsibility of doing the chiropractic care and the adjustments for 120 people on average per week, but he's also making hiring decisions. He's responsible for paying the bills and running the business, being a manager of the business as well. And he took on the financial risk of buying a practice from someone a few years back and taking over a practice. So things aren't going to happen overnight for John. Like John's on the right path. But we want to start thinking, we want our audience and our listeners to think about it through this lens where in John's case, it's kind of like, well, whatever's left over, I'll pay myself.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's an okay starting point, but that's not the end goal. It's like, all right, well, if overhead's already kind of, there's not a whole lot of fat to trim, we need to start building our revenue so that the practice can pay you a reasonable salary for, first of all, let's get to the first point where you're getting paid fairly for the work you're doing as a chiropractor. And then ideally a larger salary on top of that for taking on the management responsibilities of the practice. And then ideally we get the revenue to a point where you can start allocating 2, 5, 10% away to a profit account and start paying and generating yourself a profit for taking on this extra risk of running a practice.
Yeah, exactly. And that's in this example, like I think that's exactly the trajectory John is on. Like he's going to get there where he's bumping his compensation to what he would have to pay to replace himself, plus building a profitable practice where he can draw profits quarterly, monthly, annually, whatever, to compensate himself. So yeah, that's the goal in our mind, right? Like that should be the starting point of like, you take on this risk, you should be paid fairly for the work you do as a chiropractor and for the risk you're taking as a business owner.
Yep, for sure. Yeah. That's really the in my opinion, the major takeaway here is like understanding what your overhead is. Like there's a reality to that. What do we need to do in the practice to one of two things? Obviously, it's a conversation that we're continuously having. Is it a revenue issue? Is it an overhead issue where there's a lot of fat and stuff that we need to trim down to bring your overhead percentage down? Is it a combination of both? Usually is in a lot of cases, but that doesn't happen overnight. There's a lot of work that needs to be done for someone like John and for, I'm sure many of our listeners are like, yeah, it's not that easy. Like, yeah, we want to grow our practice and bring in more revenue and whatnot. But as you continue to go down that path of growing your practice and working on your systems and bringing down overhead and increasing revenue, I think it's important to start thinking about how you pay yourself from your practice through that lens of, I should be paid well for the adjustment work that I'm doing, for the managerial work that I'm responsible for, and I should be generating a profit for taking on that risk. And one thing that April mentioned a few episodes back, it's like profit shouldn't be a negative thing. You know, you're not being greedy by having a profit. It's not, what did she say? It's not profit over people. It's not profit over planet. Like if your business is not profitable, what are the chances that your business and your practice is going to be around in 5, 10 years from now? It needs to be profitable to be sustainable, to serve the community, to serve your people long term.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a good reminder. It's not a bad word.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think just having this conversation makes me question or want to throw at this idea that, like, do you have to be a practice owner to be successful? And should that be everyone's goal? Right? Like, I don't know. Obviously, we only, have interacted with the number of chiropractors we have. We don't know everyone in the industry, but I get this sense. I'm curious to hear your take on this, Scott. I get this sense that like a lot of people are coming out of chiropractic school with this idea being kind of put on them that they need to be a practice owner.
Yeah. I would
Would
agree.
you? Yeah.
I guess that's what I agree from just my experience and our experience collectively of the conversations and the people that we've met, that it seems like that's the path that most should take coming out of the school, is that at some point I should move into practice ownership because that's my ticket. That's the path that I need to be on to achieve my long-term goals and to live the lifestyle that I want to live. We've also on the flip side of that, we've also worked with a lot of associate chiropractors who are crushing it and doing really well. They're in a great practice. They have no desire of taking on the responsibilities of ownership and management. They just want to do their thing. They want to be a chiropractor. They want to serve the families and the people that love working with. And they're totally good with the split and walking out of the practice at the end of the day and be like, get my check as a subcontractor. I have my own little overhead in my professional corp. And
Mhm.
we've seen a lot of success going that avenue as well, right? We've seen the
Yeah.
success on both sides, but we've also definitely seen the challenges that come with practice ownership that come with any business owner in any industry out there.
Yeah. It's interesting that, like, I wonder if it's societal pressure too, like beyond just kind of what we're taught in, or what our clients are taught in chiropractic school, or if it's family pressure, whatever. There's probably a lot of things that are leading to that desire to be a practice owner. Just some where my mind goes with this is like, let's look at some math. Like, if let's say you start practice right out of school, how many years is it going to take you have the client base to pay you what you should be earning as a chiropractor? Let's just say it's starting, let's just call it 120K a year, as like how long it's going to take you to get there. And then on top of that, how long is it going to take you to be profitable, where you're maybe pulling in, you know, a quarter of that, say, 30,000 a year in profits, is going to work as an associate at an established practice. And what are your earnings going to be? What's your growth going to be from an earnings perspective? Like, as an associate at an established practice, are you going to build your client base that much faster? Is there already an established base that you can draw from and get up to that 120, 180 visits per week, 200 visits per week, whatever that number is? At what point is the break even? And is that risk worth it? Like, if the break even is 10, 15 years, where like the practice owner starts to, outweigh associate pay, then is that worthwhile? And is it worth all that additional risk and stress and stuff of being a business owner? On the flip side, if you love the business side of things as well as being a chiropractor, that's awesome. Good for you. You're probably going to crush it because you're going to want to know what your overheads are, and you're going to be in your QuickBooks and talking to your bookkeeper and your accountant and strategizing all of these different options to grow your business.
Mhm.
I think we have to be honest with ourselves and figuring out what excites us. What do we want out of life? Is it like, is part of our identity being that practice owner and we love the business side of things, or are we just doing it because we feel like we ought to?
Yeah, for sure. Practice owners, if they're really into it for maybe even more so than being a chiropractor, but to be an owner and to manage a team and to build systems and like that's driving them forward. I would imagine for a lot of those individuals that the end goal isn't to be doing the actual adjustments 20, 30 plus hours per week. They're going to slowly transition maybe out more of the role into a managerial director role of managing the business versus actually being in the business, being the one seeing the patients, right?
Yeah.
That's obviously not everyone, but for some.
And again, I just don't think there's any right or wrong answer. Either path or some version of a bit of both can be extremely rewarding. It just depends on who you are as an individual and what is important to you, what gives you light and energy.
Yeah, for sure. I got my ideas, but what do you think the takeaways here are from what we've kind of gone through today on this
Yeah,
topic?
I think look at your compensation. If you're a practice owner right now, how much are you compensating yourself, and what would it cost you to replace yourself?
Yeah, based on your current like clinical hours of actually
Yeah.
how many patients you're seeing per week, per month, right?
Yeah, however you want to look at that, whether it's hours worked or patient visits or a combination of, like, there's got to be an
Yeah.
easy way to, like you did, to just ballpark generalize. This is something that I don't think needs that intricate detail as a starting point. It's just like, do some napkin math, figure it out. What's the like range?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
And I guess it's just being just add to that. I think you're right. Like understanding your numbers, what's your overhead? What are you paying yourself in relation to like what you're bringing in terms of collections, or you and maybe you're in a partnership with your spouse, for example, bringing in revenue together. At the end of the day, if you're not happy with how much you're getting paid, as long as you have an idea of how you're going to move forward, right? Like, are you moving forward in a direction where that's just going to be this, like, are you going to be in the same spot a year from now, 24 months from now? It's okay to be like, I'm not getting paid what I should be getting paid, but I have a plan to get me from point A to point B where I'm going to be in a position in 12 months from now, 24 months from now, where my salary is going to go from 100,000 to 150,000. And I'm going to bring my profitability from 0% to 5%. And I see how I'm going to get there. I see the path forward. And if that's the case, then awesome.
Yeah. Ultimately, we got to find find a way to map that out, I think is what we're getting at is like, first, we got to identify, is there a problem? And if you can start by like, in the example you shared, that the problem wasn't the operating expenses being too high. It was the revenue not being high enough essentially to support that. So is it a revenue problem? Is it an expense problem? A combination of? Can we identify that? And then how do we make a plan working forward? And yeah, not to pick on people or like pinpoint where to start here, but like too often we've heard this that like, oh, well, I talked to my accountant about this and, it sounds like everything's good or, everything was good from what my accountant said. Your accountant's probably not looking forward into the future. Let's just be clear. Their job usually is to file taxes and look at what's happened in the rearview mirror. So you need to find somebody that's going to look ahead into the future and make a plan with you.
For sure. Yep. Well said. Anything else you want to hit on?
Know your numbers. Know your
Right.
numbers. And yeah, with all this stuff, it's so personal. You don't have to be a practice owner to be a successful person. Being an associate can work as well. You don't have to see 200 patients a week to be successful. It could be your number could be 120. What matters far more than the number of patients you see is how much you're actually taking home out of that. Just understanding your numbers is a starting point.
Such a great kind of final takeaway there is that it is very personal to you and your practice. Yeah, whether you're an associate or more specifically based on this conversation as an owner, whether you're doing $300,000-$400,000 a year in revenue as a solo doc practice, or you have a team of 2 or 3 and you're doing, somewhere between $500,000 and $1 million plus. It doesn't like anywhere in between, really. Just understanding what your overhead is, what your compensation structure is, it kind of goes back to the whole premise of like, know your numbers, have a system in place, consider something like Profit First, which we talked on before, to help you understand your numbers from a day-to-day operational standpoint of when cash flow is coming in, am I allocating towards these various accounts and understand my percentages? And looking through it from that lens, it's a great starting point.
Yep.
Should we leave it there?
Let's leave it there.
All right. Well, thank you for tuning in. As always, appreciate you being here. Thanks, Chris.
Thank you. Chat. See you guys next week.
Sounds good. See you next week. All opinions expressed on the Chiro Money Show are for educational, informational, and entertainment purposes only. Nothing on this podcast should be considered financial, legal, accounting, or tax advice. Always consult your own team of licensed professionals before making decisions about your finances.